gone to a concert and the band starts playing one of those songs that everybody knows, one of their greatest hits. You can feel the excitement building before the first chorus has even arrived. And then it happens. Without anyone saying a word, people start clapping. Not just clapping, but clapping together. The singer or the band doesn't tell people to clap. There isn't a conductor standing in front of the audience. Nobody counts them in. And yet, within just a few seconds, hundreds, even thousands of people somehow find exactly the same beat. How does that happen? How can a crowd of complete strangers suddenly begin acting like one giant organism? As it turns out, the answer has almost nothing to do with applause and everything to do with how our brains are wired. Want to know more? Please stay tuned. Hi, I'm Becky from Music is Academic, and I work with teachers, schools, families, and organizations to turn brain science into practical tools that support learning, attention, and regulation. If you've ever watched a crowd closely, you'll notice that this kind of group rhythmic movement isn't something that only happens at concerts. It happens in all kinds of places, often without us even realizing it. Think about the last time you were at a sporting event. The crowd starts cheering, and before long, everyone is chanting together. Or maybe you've been to a graduation where the applause somehow settles into a steady rhythm. The same things happens at churches, pep rallies, theaters, and even on playgrounds. We don't usually stop to think about it because it just feels so natural, but it's actually quite remarkable. What makes it even more interesting is that synchronized clapping isn't inevitable. If you listen carefully at the very beginning, you'll hear dozens of different rhythms. Some people clap quickly, others more slowly, and others aren't clapping at all. For a few moments, it's wonderfully chaotic. Then something changes. Almost without anyone noticing, the different rhythms begin to disappear. People adjust ever so slightly. Someone speeds up a little, someone else slows down, and before long, the crowd has settled into a single shared beat. Nobody announces the change, and there isn't one person leading the group. It simply emerges. Scientists have been fascinated by this phenomenon for many years because it raises a much bigger question than why do people clap? The real question is, why are our brains so quick to coordinate with one another? Why does a room full of strangers naturally drift toward the same rhythm instead of staying completely independent? It turns out this really isn't a story about applause at all. Clapping just happens to be one of the easiest places to see something our brains are doing all the time. Whether we're talking, walking, singing, dancing, or simply spending time with other people, our nervous systems are constantly paying attention to timing. We're listening, predicting, adjusting, and coordinating in ways that usually happen completely outside of our awareness. And that simple observation, that our brains are always looking for ways to synchronize, opens the door to something much bigger. It helps explain not only why crowds clap together, but why rhythm has such a powerful influence on learning, relationships, regulation, and even the way we experience being part of a group. So what is happening inside the brain when a crowd suddenly begins clapping together? One of the most fascinating things neuroscientists have discovered is that our brains aren't simply reacting to what we hear. They're constantly trying to predict what will happen next. Every sound, every movement, and every rhythm provides information that helps the brain anticipate what is coming before it actually happens. Music is especially good at this because it gives us a steady pulse. Once the brain detects that pulse, it begins making predictions almost instantly. Instead of waiting for each beat to arrive, your brain starts expecting it. That allows you to clap, tap your foot, or sing along at exactly the right moment. Excuse me. Now imagine that happening in a room filled with hundreds or thousands of people. Everyone is hearing the same music. Everyone's brain is making the same kind of predictions. As people listen to one another, they make tiny adjustments without ever thinking about it. If they're clapping just a little too fast, they naturally slow down. If they're slightly behind, they catch up. Those adjustments are incredibly small, but when hundreds or thousands of people are making them at the same time, the crowd gradually locks into a shared rhythm. This process is known as entrainment. Simply put, entrainment is the tendency of rhythmic systems to synchronize with one another. It happens throughout nature, from pendulum clocks that eventually swing together to fireflies that begin flashing in unison. Human beings do it too, and one of the easiest places to watch it happen is in a crowd that's clapping along to music. The remarkable part is that we don't have to be taught how to do this. There isn't a special class on synchronized clapping that we all took as children. Our brains are naturally wired to coordinate with rhythmic patterns around us. It's one of the ways we make sense of the world and connect with the people in it. When you look at it that way, synchronized clapping stops being just a fun concert experience. It's actually a glimpse into one of the brain's most remarkable abilities, the ability to find order, make predictions, and coordinate with others in real time. And, as we'll see next, that ability doesn't just make concerts more exciting, it also changes the way we work together, communicate, and even learn. If synchronized clapping were only about keeping a steady beat, it would still be interesting. But researchers have discovered that something even more remarkable happens when people move in time together. Think about some of the moments that bring people together: singing in church, swaying with the crowd at a concert, marching in a parade, maybe dancing at a wedding. Even young children playing simple clapping games on the playground. These activities may look very different on the surface, but they all have one thing in common. People are sharing the same timing. When we synchronize our movements with other people, we often begin to feel more connected to them. Studies have found that moving together can increase cooperation, strengthen feelings of belonging, and even make people more willing to help one another afterward. In other words, sharing a rhythm doesn't just coordinate our movements. It can also influence our social relationships. That makes a lot of sense when you think about human history. Long before we had classrooms, smartphones, or even written language, people gathered in groups to sing, dance, drum, and work together. Our ancestors depended on cooperation to survive, and synchronization may have been one of the ways groups strengthened those social bonds. While we don't know every reason the brain developed this remarkable ability, it's clear that moving together has been part of the human story for thousands of years. You can probably think of times you've experienced this yourself. Have you ever left a concert feeling strangely connected to people you had never met, or found yourself smiling at complete strangers after everyone sang the same song together? Nothing magical happened in those moments. Your brain was simply doing what human brains have evolved to do, finding common timing and using it to create a sense of connection. And that's where this becomes so much more interesting than just a fact about concerts. If shared rhythms can help groups feel more connected, what might happen when we intentionally bring synchronization into places where people are trying to learn, solve problems, or work together? That's exactly where the research becomes especially exciting. This is one of the reasons I found this research so amazing, is that it takes something we've all experienced, like a crowd clapping at a concert, and reveals a principle that reaches far beyond music. Learning is rarely a solitary experience. Whether it's a classroom, a rehearsal, a sports team, or even a family around the dinner table, people are constantly paying attention to one another. We watch facial expressions, listen for changes in someone's voice, notice pauses in the conversation, and adjust our own actions in response. Much of successful communication depends on timing. When teachers naturally vary the pace of their speech, pause before an important point, or invite the class to respond together, they're creating temporal structure. When children chant multiplication facts, clap syllables, sing the alphabet, or just move to a steady beat when learning something new, they're doing more than adding a fun activity. They're organizing attention through time. This is one reason rhythm has remained a part of education across so many cultures and generations. Long before brain imaging or neuroscience research existed, teachers instinctively understood, and still do, that songs, chants, rhymes, and coordinated movement help children remember information and stay engaged. Today, we're beginning to understand why those approaches have endured for so long and are so effective. What's especially important is that rhythm isn't limited to music class. Every teacher uses rhythm, whether they realize it or not. It's there in a cadence of a story, or the countdown before a transition, or the back and forth flow of classroom discussion, and the predictable routines that help students know what comes next. The difference is that some of those rhythms happen by accident, while others can be used intentionally. Once you begin looking for them, you'll notice these patterns are everywhere. They help organize attention, support participation, and make group activities feel smoother and more connected. The same ability that allows hundreds of strangers to find a common beat at a concert is quietly at work in countless everyday moments where people are learning, communicating, and working together. And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway of all. The rhythm that brings a crowd together for a few minutes isn't a special concert trick. It's a window into a fundamental characteristic of the human brain, one that influences far more than our daily lives than most of us ever realize. So the next time you're in a crowd, I hope you'll watch with fresh eyes. Maybe it'll be at a concert, maybe at a sporting event, a graduation, or a community celebration. Pay attention to those first few moments of applause. Listen to the little bit of chaos at the beginning, then notice how quickly it begins to organize itself. Before long, hundreds of people who have never met each other are sharing the same rhythm as though they had practiced it together. Once you start noticing synchronization, you'll realize it isn't limited to applause. You'll see it in people walking side by side and gradually matching their pace. You'll hear it in conversations where friends naturally begin speaking in similar rhythms and pauses. You'll notice it in families singing together in the car, children skipping rope, or co-workers falling into a comfortable rhythm when working on the same task. These moments may seem ordinary, but they reveal something extraordinary about the way we're designed. Human beings are constantly adjusting to one another. Our brains are always listening, predicting, and coordinating, often without us ever being aware that it's happening. For me, that's one of the most encouraging things about neuroscience. So often we think of the brain as a collection of isolated parts doing separate jobs. But over and over again, the research points to something much more fantastic. Our brains are built not only to learn, but also to connect. Rhythm is one of the tools that makes that connection possible. So here's my question for you. Have you ever noticed a moment when a group of people suddenly fell into sync without anyone telling them what to do? I'd love to hear your story in the comments, because I have the feeling that once we start sharing these experiences, we'll discover just how common they really are. And if you'd like to continue exploring this topic, I've created a free PDF that highlights everyday examples of synchronization and explains what they can teach us about the brain. You'll find the download link in the description below. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys discovering the fascinating ways our brains work. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.